Hey y'all, and welcome to my series about D&D mechanics. In this series, I'll try to cover specific abilities and skills that players and DMs may be unsure of. Many times, new players and veterans alike will use an ability or feature wrongly, on accident. Sometimes it's simply because the wording is weird or there's a line that everyone forgets. It's an understandable mistake. This series should help with those rules, and I hope you find this video helpful, and if so, please be sure to like and share this video with your fellow nerds. Today, we'll be covering sneak attack. Its specific mechanics, the common misunderstandings I see in-game with this mechanic, and how each subclass affects this mechanic. As a rogue, your sneak attack is your bread and butter. If you don't get your sneak attack off on each turn, it is a huge amount of wasted damage potential. Personally, I don't like that. Rogues are geared toward burst damage like this. But it's the current mechanics, so here we go. You'll find the sneak attack on page 96 of the player's handbook. Beginning at first level, you know how to strike subtly and exploit a foe's distraction. Once per turn, you can deal an extra 1d6 to one creature you hit with an attack if you have advantage on the attack roll. The attack must use a finesse or ranged weapon. You don't need advantage on the attack roll if another enemy of the target is within 5 feet of it. That enemy isn't incapacitated, and you don't have disadvantage on the attack roll. The amount of extra damage increases as you gain levels in this class, as shown in the sneak attack column of the rogue table. Alright, let's break this down. Now, the biggest confusion I see with this mechanic is mixing it up with advantage. So you see scenarios where a rogue is attacking a creature in melee with an ally from ranged, thinking they automatically have advantage due to having sneak attack. An example is your rogue goblin or halfling or whoever taking pop shots from cover or the distance, even if it's just an open field, just being within range of your ranged weapon attack and shooting at this enemy while your melee fighter combats them. Now you can shoot, and if you hit, you add your sneak attack damage, as long as you don't have disadvantage. So if you're firing with a short bow and they're within 60 feet, you do not have disadvantage. So you get to add sneak attack. But you don't have advantage in this scenario. You just add sneak attack. You roll once, if you hit, boom, sneak attack. Now, if you take the same scenario and you use your cunning action to hide before shooting, well, then you gain both advantage and sneak attack, as long as you successfully hide. I know I said this video is about sneak attack, but it's impossible to talk about sneak attack without also covering cunning action. You usually see one of two playstyles when it comes to rogues. That's the stealth archer or the dual-wielding hit-and-run skulker. Both playstyles require the use of cunning action to work. Now, I've already explained how explained how the ranged option works. Now let's talk about the dual wielder. You're most likely going to need some kind of invisibility spell, because you cannot hide in plain view with the rules as written. Because when you hide, you break your stealth by coming into plain view. And in combat, creatures are going to be looking out for danger. If you're hidden, or by invisibility, you can always attempt to hide, even if you're out in the open. Most campaigns do use the optional rule for flanking, which can be found in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 251. If you plan on using the dual-wielding melee fighter playstyle, make sure to talk about flanking in your session 0, because your DM does technically have the right to reject it as a rule because it is optional. But so are feats, and I will never play at a table that doesn't allow them. Basically, flanking means if you and an ally are in melee combat with a creature on exact opposite sides, you can attack with advantage. This is how you squeeze in that sneak attack. Now, if you land the first hit, you pop off your sneak attack, and then you use your bonus action to disengage and run away. So what I'm talking about is your fighter's fighting a brute. You run up with your dagger, and you're going to go on the opposite side of him. Because for flanking to work, you need to be 180 degrees from your fighter, or the ally that is engaging with them. If your fighter is here and you are there, you do not get advantage, which also means you do not get sneak attack. Unless you're a swashbuckler, but we'll talk about that later. Here, no sneak attack, because you do not get advantage from flanking. But if you are using the flanking rules, this does count as flanking. This counts as flanking. And so does this. Again, you have to be 180 degrees on exact opposite sides of the enemy. Now, you're not always fighting medium creatures. If you're fighting a large creature, this also counts as sneak attack. Flanking, sorry. This also counts as flanking, which then gives you advantage, which then gives you sneak attack. This does not count as flanking. Again, oh no, what have I done? That does, as well as this. So the distance doesn't matter. As long as you are on exact opposite sides, as long as basically an imaginary line that you draw passes through the center of the enemy. You can see how that does not happen there, but here it does. So that is the mechanics of flanking. The reason this works great with dual wielding, and the reason you're going to use dual wielding if you plan on melee, is you're going to use 2 light weapons, because the light weapon property allows you to use your bonus action to make a second attack with your offhand, as long as both of your hands are wielding light weapons. So if you make your main attack with your first hand and you miss because you're not using the flanking rules, so you did not have advantage, and you swipe and miss, well, you're going to use your bonus action to take that second swipe and slice again. I'm not going to get into the weeds of this because offhand and light property, all that gets a little bit more specific, but basically your weapon damage with that second attack will be less. But we don't care about weapon damage. We care about sneak attack damage. And if you can hit and have that and you have advantage somehow, or you're hidden, well, no, actually, this would only work with flanking unless you somehow still have advantage on that bonus action attack, because once you attack from invisibility or hidden, you are no longer hidden. So only that first attack would have advantage, granting you the sneak attack. So again, you're really going to need to talk to your DM about using flanking. There are other methods that we'll talk about in subclass features to grant you advantage. One is the help action. If an ally is using the help action for you to make this attack, you do gain advantage. But that would require them to do that on their turn, before your turn. But let's say for some reason you do have advantage. You have advantage on both hits, you miss the first one, and you land the second one and you proc your sneak attack. Well, you just used your bonus action to get that sneak attack off, which means you now do not have your bonus action to use your cunning action to disengage and run away. So, unless you run away without disengaging, risking the enemy hitting you with an attack of opportunity, you are now stuck in melee range until your next turn. Which usually means the enemy will get another turn before you. And rogues, they're not the squishiest, but they're not the sturdiest. The other thing I want to highlight is the once per turn clarification. This means during your turn, you can only add sneak attack to one attack. But if for some reason you get to attack outside of your turn, you can then add sneak attack again. The most common ways to do this are either with attacks of opportunity or with the battle maneuver commander strike. I'm gonna be honest, that's pretty much it for base sneak attack. So if you do not care about knowing how the subclasses affect it, this is the end of the video. You get it whenever you have advantage. You also get it when you attack from ranged without disadvantage and a ally is in melee combat with the enemy. Now we're going to move on to your subclasses. I will pin or bookmark the chapters for the specific subclasses so you can skip ahead to whichever one you plan on playing or you are the most interested in and seeing how their specific subclass abilities and mechanics affect sneak attack. Again, this will not be a deep dive into these subclasses and how their abilities work. You can refer to the Dungeon Dudes or Treant Monk or the D4s for specific builds or subclass builds and stuff like that. What I'm going to help you understand is how your specific subclass synergizes and utilizes sneak attack. We're going to start with the Arcane Trickster. Now, this one does the least with sneak attack. The Arcane Trickster is going to be, I say the least, but arguably it's the second least because you do still get some things. There is one class that literally gives you nothing for sneak attack. So this class gives you the second least amount of things towards sneak attack. This one is located on page 90. Technically 97, but bulk of it's on page 98 of the player's handbook. This subclass is going to be better for thieving. I'm going to lead with that. There are only 3 real methods for improving your sneak attack with this subclass, and honestly, they're mostly garbage. The first method is going to be titled the Helpful Familiar. Now, this works by taking the Find Familiar spell at first level. The Arcane Trickster only gets 3 spells, and only one of them can be outside of the schools of illusion or enchantment. Find Familiar is Conjuration. So this means you have to make that one spell Find Familiar. But once you summon a familiar, you can then use that familiar in combat. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is Richard talking about? The Find Familiar spell specifically states you cannot take an attack during combat. This is true, but you can take all other actions as normal, which means you can take the help action. So your familiar can use their turn to use the help action. Now they have to be within 5 feet of the enemy that they're applying this to. But in doing so, this now gives you, because I'm assuming you're having your familiar help you gain advantage, so this then grants you advantage on your next attack against it. This is awesome because advantage automatically means you get sneak attack. Sneak attack, again, sneak attack doesn't automatically mean advantage, but the reverse is true. Not all squares are rectangles, but all rectangles are squares, I believe. This can be a bit annoying for other players. It can also get old and tiresome. And I don't want to say immersion breaking, but when you're at like 12th level and you're using your owl to distract the giant dragon so you can get your sneak attack off, that's, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. But it is a functional ability that many people use, and it is a tactic Jeremy Crawford himself has said works. Or he would allow, sorry. He did not answer it as a sage advice, but he said at his tables he would allow it. The second one is invisibility. As previously stated, even if your DM decides not to use the optional flanking rules, you can still gain advantage on your melee attacks by going invisible and using your cunning action to hide as you approach the enemy. The downside of this method is you can't get the invisibility spell until 7th level. So you'll be stuck using the helpful familiar method until 7th level, which you can then switch to the invisibility method. And even then you get limited uses of your spell slots. And are you really going to want to use your 1/3 caster's limited spells on invisibility? For combat, I don't know. I wouldn't, but hey, to each their own. The third and final method, and honestly probably the worst method, is going to be a helping hand. This mechanic will work almost exactly like the helpful familiar method, but instead of an expensive familiar, you use your subclass's special mage hand for the help action. This is at 13th level that you gain this ability. It's called Versatile Trickster. Again, this is the worst method because you're going to use your bonus action to instruct the hand, your invisible mage hand, to use the help action. So now you don't get your cunning action, and your hand now gives you advantage on your attack. Honestly, the invisibility method is going to be better than this. The only benefit you get is the helping hand is free. So the familiar costs you money every time it dies. The helping hand, I don't believe, does the helping hand method, your mage hand. So I'm going to be honest, my recommendation for this subclass is to stick with range attacks and focus on being the out-of-combat cat burglar. Because you could almost argue that this class is a better thief than the thief. But when it comes to sneak attack, you really don't get that much additional benefits. Going on the opposite side of the spectrum, but staying in the book, you have the Assassin. Man, the Assassin is one of the most iconic rogue subclasses. When you think rogue, you either think of a burglar running across rooftops in the night or a shadowy silhouette moving in the just moving in for the fast and fatal strike, slicing the throat. This subclass is the latter. It only has one ability that affects sneak attack, though. Well, technically two. Double stacked. You get it as soon as you take this subclass. The Assassinate ability. This subclass, as well as the Assassinate ability, are both found on page 97 of the player's handbook. You automatically have advantage on any creature that hasn't taken a turn in combat. And if you somehow catch the enemy off guard and the DM gives them the surprise condition, you automatically crit. Now, per rules as written, a critical hit doubles the damage dice, which means if you're at 3rd level, you have 2d6 sneak attack. If you're using a short bow, that's 1d6, so you're now up to 3d6. You then double that as a crit if you manage to surprise the enemy. The problem is the surprise condition is going to get its own video because in 5e it is designed awfully. With that being said, it's still really cool if it works, because auto-critting is amazing, especially when you're getting sneak attack on that auto-crit. Whew. Imagine that, 3rd level, getting the drop on an enemy and being able to drop 66. That's a lot of damage, especially then you add in your modifiers. Pretty impressive. But not as impressive as the 17th level ability you gain to force surprise enemies to make Constitution saving throws. And on a failed save, that critical hit damage is also doubled, meaning your roll double the amount of dice is then doubled. Amazing, right? Except for this is a 17th level ability, so this is tier 4 gameplay. Trying to get a surprise round in tier 4 gameplay is like finding a fist-sized diamond buried in your backyard. This subclass has a huge drawback. The super cool mechanic only works during the first round of any combat. So if the enemy gets a higher initiative than you, this ability doesn't affect them, because they have now gotten to go before you. And this only affects people who haven't gone yet. And even then, it's only the first round, because then once you hit the second round, everyone's had a turn. So unless your wizard has an ability to skip someone's initiative, like just flat out skip their turn, you're only getting these abilities on the first round. And surprised only happens on the first round. So you somehow have to catch your enemies. You're going to be trying to catch your enemies off guard, getting that surprise, and then also trying to go first, which means you're probably going to invest in the alert feat, which gives you +5 to your initiative. This is a very first strike playstyle, like hit first, ask questions later. Literally an assassin. I'd recommend talking to your group at session 0 about leaning into ambush tactics, because if you pick this subclass and another player at your table is playing an impatient berserker barbarian that charges as soon as you see the enemy, you're going to find this subclass severely lacking. That's pretty much it for the assassin, though. I know. Not as impressive as I thought it would be. But let's move over to something I personally find extremely flavorful and probably has an amazing, consistent use for their sneak attack. So this is the first subclass not from the player's handbook, but instead found on page 45 of Xanathar's Guide to Everything. The Inquisitive. Not the Inquisitor. I don't know why, but I guess there's some copyright or whatever, but this is the Inquisitive. Personally, this is one of my favorite subclasses. I'm not going to talk about some of the other cool features it gets, but the basic feel of this class is noir rogue detective. What we are going to talk about is its strong use of sneak attack with the insightful fighting feature. You gain this ability at 3rd level as soon as you take this subclass. This feature is kind of high risk, high reward. It requires your bonus action, which, like I said, you really want to use your bonus action for cunning action to get advantage by hiding or, disengaging, stuff like that. But this feature allows you to use your bonus action to make an insight check versus a creature you can see's deception. So they roll a deception check, you roll an insight check, and whoever rolls higher wins. Now, if you fail, you wasted a bonus action, and you most likely won't get your sneak attack on this turn. But if you succeed, you automatically add sneak attack to any attack that you do not have disadvantage on for the next minute against that creature that failed. This means you have now freed up your bonus action for the rest of combat against that creature. I mean, this feature's awesome. And it's best against big bads opposed to mobs and minions. Because again, you're going to use your bonus action for insightful fighting. I would target the big bad with this and then use my bonus action to hide and attack the minions with advantage using my cunning action, because anytime I attack the big bad, I'm not going to need to be hidden. I'm just going to attack him and add my sneak attack. Now, if you find yourself somehow playing in high level gameplay, this subclass's 17th level ability allows you to add 3d6 to all attacks made using that insightful fighting feature. So, that same big bad that you used your insightful fighting against, and now get to just auto sneak attack every attack against them, regardless of if you have advantage or a flat roll. You now also get to add 3d6 on top of that sneak attack. So at 17th level, you have 9d6 sneak attack damage. If you're using a short bow, that's an extra 1d6. So you're now up to 10d6. Well, at 17th level, you now add an extra 3d6, making it 13d6. I believe there is only one other subclass in Rogue that allows you to apply more d6 worth of damage in a single sneak attack against one target creature. And we'll talk about that class later. The reason I like this class so much is because it leans into other abilities that can also benefit you outside of combat. If you're running a low magic campaign or a group of just martial characters, this subclass is a great option for the party's face or brains. Investigation, insight, perception, they're all there. I highly recommend you giving this class a try at least once in some campaign, even if it's just a one-shot. I believe the best example would be in Exandria Unlimited Calamity. Travis Willingham's bird person, I believe, was an Inquisitive. And that seemed pretty fun. Speaking of brains, there is no one that can equal the mental fortitude of a Mastermind rogue. At least not without the use of magic. Even then, they might find themselves at an extreme disadvantage. Now, I'm not going to diminish this subclass, because I can see its usefulness and the abilities and features providing many benefits in certain campaign settings. But with that being said, this subclass that appears on page 46 of Xanathar's Guide to Everything provides nothing to sneak attack. And I'm not exaggerating. Not a single one of the mechanics provided in this subclass improves sneak attack or even allow you to manipulate it in any way. You do not get manipulations to your cunning action that could help you get sneak attack easier. You do not get additional uses of sneak attack, additional damage, or even niche ways that you can use the abilities to grant you sneak attack. This class definitely feels like a niche class. A niche subclass. A veteran subclass, if you may. And by that I mean more experienced D&D players could have a lot of fun. But as a new player, you may find this subclass complicated or even lacking in your campaign. Because let's be honest, most starting campaigns are going to be modules or high fantasy, and I don't see much the Mastermind can provide that a wizard with the right spell list couldn't do better. Moving on. I don't know if you remember earlier I mentioned that there was probably one other subclass that could apply more sneak attack damage in a single sneak attack than the Inquisitive. And that's going to be the Phantom. Let's move over to page 62 of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, introducing our edgy goth rogue. Yeah, that's right. This one uses the dead to their advantage. They have a lot of cool abilities, but we're not here for their other cool abilities. We're here for their sneak attack and how they use it. And man, do they use it. Mechanically, this subclass operates the opposite of the Assassin. With the Assassin, you want a single target, and you want to focus on that target, focus fire, dump all the damage, do it all. Well, this one wants the opposite. This one wants multiple targets. You gain the ability Whales of the Grave at 3rd level. This feature doesn't grant additional ways of gaining sneak attack. What it does instead is allow any time you make a sneak attack on a creature, you can also target a second creature within 30 feet of the first. This creature takes an amount of d6s worth of necrotic damage equal to half your sneak attack damage dice, rounded up. So, using our continuous third level example, let's say for a moment that this guy's not dead because he's not in this scenario. And let's say you are no longer in melee. You're now a ranged fighter. Or, well, ranged archer. Sorry. Let's move this guy over here. We're now 30 feet away. Your fighter is fighting this large brute, and you're going to make a ranged attack against them. Now, let's say for some reason you don't have cover, so you can't gain advantage. You still get to add sneak attack because they're in melee with the fighter. This also means when you hit them and you get to add your sneak attack damage, at level 3, that's 2d6 sneak attack damage. Using a short bow, we're now at 3d6 damage. So this first person, 3d6 damage. You are then going to target the second creature over here, and you are going to take 1d6, because it's 2d6, is sneak attack. So we're going to take half of that, which is 1, and we're going to apply 1d6 of necrotic damage. That's pretty cool. But that's not more than what the... Not to a single target, that doesn't benefit us. But that's because this is the third level ability. When I talked about the Phantom being able to put out the most single target sneak attack damage, I was talking about their 17th level ability. Now their 17th level ability... Where is that? Allows you to also apply the necrotic damage to the first creature as well. So, basically, creature number 1, right here, is going to take 1.5 times your sneak attack damage, right? And this creature is going to take half of your sneak attack damage, so 0.5 times of your sneak attack damage. This is a 17th level ability, so this ability comes online when you're making 9d6 sneak attack. Remember, this is rounded up, so half of 9d6 rounded up is going to be 5d6. You're adding your short bow damage, so at 17th level, you are doing 15d6 to the first attacker, the one you're targeting with your first attack. And then any creature within 30 feet of him that you choose and can see, you can have them take an additional 5d6 necrotic damage. That is pretty powerful, especially the round up feature of this, because then when you get to odd levels of sneak attack, so 3d6, you're now doing 2d6 damage onto that second creature. And the only caveat is the creatures have to be within 30 feet of each other. So you don't have to keep targeting the same creature. You don't have to target the closest creature. And the creature doesn't have to be 30 feet away from them. This creature could easily be surrounding your fighter. And you're going to just shoot an arrow, and this shadowy, ghost, spectral, necrotic energy is going to come off of that first guy and lurch at the second one and deal half of worth of damage in necrotic energy. That's pretty cool if you ask me. One drawback is you can only use this ability a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. It does not come back on a short rest. That kind of sucks, but hey, I mean, it's a pretty strong ability. So, and this class also has other strong abilities that come with it, not related to sneak attack, which we're not covering because that's not what we're here for. But let's move along. Let's move along to the coolest sounding subclass, the Scout. I don't know. I guess Assassin sounds cooler, but the Scout sounds pretty cool. But just like the Assassin, it's kind of disappointing. On page 47 of Xanathar's Guide to Everything, we have the Wish.com version of the Ranger. We're looking at mechanics that affect sneak attack. This class only gets one. This subclass only gets one. Sorry. And it's at 17th level. If you don't read carefully, you might think the 13th level ability, Ambush Master, would help, because after you hit a creature during the first round of combat, all attacks against that creature has advantage until the start of your next turn. The problem here is the word start. That means when it gets back to you, the rest of your party got to attack it with advantage, but you didn't. You get a regular flat roll unless you use your bonus action to hide and deal your sneak attack. Kind of lame. But the 17th level ability, Sudden Strike, is better, but also a little lackluster, for me at least. Sudden Strike is kind of complicated if you don't read it too carefully. So if you take the attack action on your turn, you can then use your bonus action to make a second attack that you can also use your sneak attack on. So when you take the attack action, this kind of circumnavigates the two weapon fighting. So you no longer need to be using two daggers or two rapiers to get that second attack proc. Instead, let's keep with a ranged character, or let's say you have short swords or long swords. When you make the attack action, you can then immediately use a bonus action to make a second attack. And you can apply sneak attack damage to the second attack, even if you already applied sneak attack. So you get double sneak attack on your turn, which we said mechanically does not happen. You do not get you only get sneak attack once per turn. So unless you can attack outside of your turn, this is the only class that allows you to get sneak attack twice. Besides the Thief, that also allows you to get sneak attack twice in the first round of combat, but in a different way. And we'll get to that. The drawback with this sneak attack is a little excerpt on the end, like that last portion of the feature that states you cannot target the same target with two sneak attacks in a turn. So at 17th level, you can attack two different creatures in one turn and add sneak attack to each attack. So with this example in front of us, this creature is going to get my 1d6 short bow damage and my 9d6 sneak attack damage, and then I'm going to bonus action shoot again and hit this creature with my bonus action and hopefully hit him. Again, in this scenario I don't have advantage because you wouldn't have advantage on the second attack unless you were hidden previously. So the only way you can make this to where you have advantage on both attacks would be if you are hidden at the beginning of combat from your last turn. So you ended your turn by using the hide action, and then you attack bonus action. No, you can't, because you can't bonus action hide because your bonus action is to make the second attack. I believe the fact that this allows you to just add your sneak attack, I just don't see how you get advantage on this. So you don't get advantage on that second attack. I really can't see how you would do that. But you do get your sneak attack because you have to use your bonus action to make that second attack. You cannot use your cunning action to hide. You can't simply have cover, right? That doesn't hide you. The hide is a specific mechanic. It's an action you need to take. So Even if the first attack has advantage, the second attack won't have advantage, which means you have an increased chance of missing, and you then get to add your sneak attack to it. But let's say this guy's a nobody, and you could do, like, you could roll all ones on your sneak attack and drop them, but you really want to dump both sneak attacks into this guy. You can't. You cannot target them with your second sneak attack. Now, you can hit them with your second attack, because it says you can add your sneak attack to that second attack. So you can attack once, use your attack action, hit him with your short bow, add sneak attack, do 10d6 damage. You can then add another attack, and hopefully you hit, and then you get to add another d6 damage. So you're now doing 11d6. The Scout and the Thief allow you to do the most sneak attack damage in a round. And the Scout allows you to consistently do it each turn. But it's divvied up. You cannot double down onto a creature, which means if you're getting this at 17th level and you're fighting ancient dragons, Tiamat, Tarask, things like that, you're not getting to single target your BBEG. The big bad evil guy does not get all of the damage. You have to shift some of the damage somewhere else. So hopefully he has some pretty powerful lieutenants that you can drop both of them while your other characters focus the BBEG, or something like that. Handling strong trash mobs. Let's say you're fighting a Draco, or let's say you're fighting a Lich riding a Draco Lich. You get to hit both. It's cool. It's interesting. I feel like not letting you target the same creature twice is a little unnecessary because it is tier 4 gameplay. And in 5e, that's kind of broken. Some of the other classes' abilities at tier 4, 17th and beyond level are just ridiculous. But I digress. That's it for the Scout. That's what I've got. The highest sneak attack damage per round consistently throughout combat, as long as you have multiple viable targets. If you're fighting solo, not as great. But let's move on to the Souknife. Let's do some more book hopping. Head back to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything for a somewhat complicated but also interesting subclass located on page 63. The Souknife has a lot of additional mechanics to it, but most of them don't actually apply to sneak attack until 17th level, arguably due to gaining the ability that grants you invisibility 13th level. The cool ability that affects sneak attack is 17th level ability, Rend Mind. It doesn't make sneak attack easier to proc or add damage, but what it does do is pretty cool. When you use your Psychic Blades granted to you from this subclass to deal sneak attack damage to a creature, you can force that target to make a Wisdom saving throw. And if they fail, they're stunned for a minute. Now, while stunned, all attacks against the creature have advantage. So as long as they are stunned, you get your sneak attack. And because your Psychic Blades can make 2 attacks a turn using your bonus action, you're almost guaranteed sneak attack every round while they're stunned. That's pretty cool. That's also pretty much it for the Souknife when it comes to sneak attack. A lot of their other abilities are outside of combat. Still pretty cool, but we're just looking at sneak attack, and that's all they really do for sneak attack, besides also turning invisible. That's at 13th level, though. The Arcane Trickster gets that at 7th. Arguably, there's a feat, that you can get that with, or specific races. Yeah. But I digress. To the Swashbuckler. Did I mention we were book hopping? Let's head back to Xanathar's Guide of Everything, specifically page 47. For honestly, the rogue subclass I have seen the most in any of my campaigns. You could argue that this subclass has 3 abilities that affect sneak attack, because remember, cunning action and sneak attack are so intertwined that anything that frees up your cunning action benefits your sneak attack. At 3rd level, you get Fancy Footwork, which basically steals the best ability from the mobile feat. And it works like this. Any creature you make a melee attack against cannot make attacks of opportunity against you in that turn. Meaning you do not have to use your disengage action, your cunning action for the disengage action after you make an attack from that specific creature. Now, if you're running into a trash mob, the other ones that you didn't attack are going to get to make attack of opportunities against you, but a little bit of finessing on the battlefield, you should be able to avoid that. Also, at 3rd level, you get the best feature of this subclass, arguably one of the best rogue 3rd level features. Rakish, Rakishi Audacity. That's one of those words I've read 1,000 times, but I've never actually heard it said, so I may be saying it wrong. This allows you to go into melee combat without flanking and get to add sneak attack. So remember, flanking is an optional rule. Your DM can say hell no. And, you can decide if you want to play in that game or not, but if you do, you're doing so without flanking, which means in melee combat, you're not going to be able to get advantage. But who needs advantage when you have Rakish Audacity? Because this allows you to add sneak attack to any melee attack against a creature when it's the only one within 5 feet of you. So as long as there's not another creature within 5 feet of you, so immediately in your combat area, you get sneak attack. You do not get advantage, to clarify, because sneak attack and advantage are separate. Square is a rectangle, rectangle is in a square kind of deal. So whenever you have advantage, you get sneak attack. But not every time when you get sneak attack do you have advantage. So as long as you do not have disadvantage on the melee attack for whatever reason, and it is the only creature within 5 feet of you, you get to add your sneak attack to that melee attack. Now at 17th level, it flips and it actually becomes kind of lame. Most subclasses, the 3rd level abilities are okay, and the 17th level abilities are ridiculous. This one's kind of the opposite. 3rd level abilities are pretty amazing. The 17th level ability, you basically give yourself advantage on a missed attack once per long rest. So if you swing and miss on a roll you didn't have advantage or disadvantage on, you can roll another die, and if it hits, you get that lovely sneak attack. Again, for a 17th level ability, this is pretty lackluster. I would probably prefer to just take like 3 levels in Fighter and pick up one of the Fighter subclasses that you can, like Samurai or Champion, which will benefit your sneak attack more than this ability will. Even just picking up that action surge would be amazing. But that's, again, the 3rd level ability though, both of those are pretty great. And technically the 17th level ability does grant you advantage, so then if you missed and you weren't going to get sneak attack, you now can hit. You get a second chance to hit, and because it is technically verbally written down to be advantage, you get to add sneak attack. Okay, our last time hopping books, but it's for our last subclass. This time, we're going to go all the way back to the Player's Handbook, page 97, for the iconic rogue subclass, the Thief. Now, this subclass's abilities pretty much perfectly fall in line with its flavor. With that being said, it doesn't lean heavy into damage. It does have a pretty great ability, though, that benefits sneak attack. So in the first round of combat, at 17th level, you get 2 turns in 1 round. The very first round, you get 2 turns. Yeah, that's right. Because at 17th level, you get the ability Thief's Reflexes. To simplify it, you roll for initiative. Whatever your initiative roll is, that's your first turn. You then take that initiative roll, subtract 10 from it, and that's when you take your second turn in the initiative order. So, let's say you roll a 27, DM will jot you down in the initiative order in slot 27, and then he's going to subtract 10 from that. Well, you're going to have to instruct them because it's not up to the DM to know every player's class abilities. But you're going to subtract 10 from that, and you're going to tell the DM to also jot you down for the 17th slot. So, depending on how high your initiative is, say you have a few feats or high dex or multi-class ability that gives you, let's say you got 30 initiative. You now have initiative 30 and initiative 20. You may get to just go twice back to back before someone else gets to go. Now, the reason this is kind of better than the Scout's ability is because it's better and worse. So it's better because in the first round, you can target the same creature with 2 sneak attacks in the first round. So there's no limitation. You can't, it's not like, because they're 2 separate turns. So first turn, attack, sneak attack, boom. Couple people have turns, and then it's back to your second turn. You get to attack, sneak attack, boom, the same person. But when it gets to the second round of combat, you no longer have that second turn. That only applies to the first round in combat. So the Scout would technically be doing way more consistent damage unless you're fighting a solo creature. If you're fighting a solo enemy, the big bad, let's say Lord Zod, a Death Knight of some kind, or something like an ancient dragon, and the Scout's only getting that 1 thing of sneak attack per turn, whereas the Thief is getting 2 in that first round. And again, 9d6, adding your short bow 10d6, you're doing 20d6 in the first round of combat. And because they're separate turns, you can take your bonus action, your cunning action, hide before each attack, granting you advantage, therefore granting you your sneak attack. I mean, that's pretty great. It's going to guarantee that your combat is short-lived. It's not great compared to some of the others, technically, because, it's only a one-off thing. But if you compare it to the Assassin's ability, which is also limited to the first round of combat, this is pretty much more consistent than its 17th level ability, but it also is basically just their 3rd level ability minus all the extra stuff. But that has been my in-depth look of sneak attack and how all the subclass use that mechanic. The last few things I want to talk about in this video are going to be character creation ideas to keep in mind when creating your rogue, especially with sneak attack. So obviously, first thing we're going to start out with is what species you're going to play. I'm not going to tell you what species to play. I'm not going to tell you specific builds. But what I'm going to tell you is, depending on your campaign, dark vision versus flying. Right now, I know some people will probably say, ¿Por qué no los dos? Well, I mean, you could do that. You could pick a specific, I think there's a tiefling sub-variant that gives you that. I believe the Asmar gives you that. But what I'm saying is, which one benefits your campaign the most is something you need to talk about in Session 0. If you're doing a Underdark dungeon crawl, or a, hunt beast at night kind of campaign, or skulking around a vampire's domain, dark vision is going to be pretty beneficial. But if you're doing mostly overland travel, if you're doing a mountainous campaign where you have to go over the mountains and fight giants, if you're doing a nautical campaign where you're on a boat all the time, when you're doing seafair travel, flying is going to drastically outpace dark vision. So that's just one thing to consider. Talk about it at session 0, because if you don't have dark vision and it's dark, you're not getting your sneak attack. But if you don't need dark vision, because the campaign's not going to be including it too much, then look at a flying race possibly, if your table allows it. The second thing is spellcasting for advantage. What I mean by that is only one of the rogues gets spellcasting, and it's a 1/3 caster. So you're either playing a rogue that does not get spellcasting, so getting a little bit of spellcasting to benefit you would be nice, or you're playing the one rogue that has spellcasting and depends upon it for their daily activities, but instead of using your spells to help your sneak attack, you can now use your class spells for the other abilities, and you can try and use the spells you gain through your species to help you with your sneak attack. Examples are like drow, fairies, fairbolgs, deep gnomes, all those ones released in Monsters of the Multiverse, but including Dark Elf. All of those can help you with their spellcasting gain advantage. Fairy Fire, invisibility, stuff like that. The next thing you're going to look at is a dexterity bonus. With Tasha's Cauldron of Everything released, this doesn't matter as much because you can move around the ability modifiers as you deem necessary for your build. So pretty much any race, stat-wise or species stat-wise, can play any build. But if for some reason your table is not playing by those rules, which some still don't, or if you just don't have Tasha's and you're just using the player's handbook, you're going to be looking for specific species that give you racial bonuses to dexterity. So mostly elves and half elves, gonna be honest. Outside of that, I don't know exactly which ones, maybe tiefling, but you're mostly going to be focusing on elves at that point. Elves also give you the benefit of elven weapon proficiency, so I think you can get longbow, which can be pretty nice. The next thing you're going to consider is extra movement, because you have cunning action. You can bonus action dash. If you free up your cunning action by taking a species that gives you just extra movement or the ability to move without provoking opportunity attacks, then that frees your cunning action up to hide, or even your bonus action for some of these other subclasses that require it to make extra attacks, like the scout, using the tabaxi's increased movement, but then using your cunning action, for hiding. It can be helpful, right? You can get all kinds of benefits from it, and sometimes it's just fun hopping around the battlefield. The last thing you're going to look at when considering species is going to be anything that increases your damage. The Bugbear is an example because they have a sneak attack that basically, if you're attacking, it doubles down on Assassin, because if you're attacking someone before they have a round in combat or something like that, I think it's like surprised, or if you get the drop on them or you go before them in combat on the first round, you get to add 2d6 extra damage on top of your sneak attack, which is already a bajillion d6 worth of sneak attack damage. That adds up. The Asmar is here because I believe one of the specific variants of it allows you to add radiant damage to each attack. So your sneak attack gets even more damage. But that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about when it comes to species. All in all, rogues can be almost anyone. I know I didn't mention halflings, but You know, they're in here somewhere. They fit one of these. But let's talk about feats. Now, the interesting about the rogue is the rogue gets one more feat than any other class, except for the fighter. The fighter gets one more feat than the rogue, two more feats than everyone else. The rogue is also interesting because, unlike the fighter, the rogue doesn't find itself as lacking, or in, I don't want to say lacking, but as in need of feats. Like fighter, realistically, to be a fighter, you got to take feats. Feats are an optional rule, which is kind of ridiculous because they built a class like the fighter around having to take feats and then made it an optional rule. But I'm not going to talk about that. That's a whole nother thing. But the rogue can take feats. I would suggest looking at half feats, especially if you have odd ability scores where you need them to be even. So if you have a 17 dex and a 13 wisdom, and you're a inquisitive, maybe instead of taking a +1/+1 to both of those stats, looking at a half feat, because you get a feat at level 4, and then I believe you end up getting another one at level 6. So you can see how, yeah, you're pushing back that. No, you don't get, you get expertise at level 6. I think you don't get your extra rogue ability until like level, so you get 8, the standard 4, 8, and then I think you get one at 10th. So yes, you're pushing back, increasing that second ability score until 8th level. But then immediately after that, at 10th level, you have another chance for a feat or ability score improvement. So I guess you could almost argue it's better to take the +1/+1 at level 4, and then at level 8 and 10, you take 2 half feats. But either way you do it, half feats are amazing. Elven accuracy grants you super advantage. So whenever you have advantage making an attack or with a dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma attack, you can roll a third d20 and take the highest out of the 3. Mobile's a really good one. It's also a half feat, I believe. But it's not great on Swashbuckler, just because the Swashbuckler already gets the main like bread and butter of the mobile feat built into the subclass. So you're kind of double dipping there and actually losing out on some of the benefits of mobile. Arcane Trickster is the opposite though, with Shadow Touched, because Shadow Touch is a half feat. I think you increase one of your mental stats, and then you get a free casting of invisibility once per day, and then a first level spell of your choice from like illusion or enchantment or something, which doubles down on the Arcane Trickster. Well, unlike the Swashbuckler, doubling down here helps because you're freeing up your spell slots. You don't have to use one of your spell slots to cast invisibility once per day. And remember, we don't get second level spell slots until level 7. If we take Shadow Touched at level 4 or level 8, either way, we're freeing up a lot. We're creating a lot because we now have a free first level spell we can cast and also know. And then you have Shadow Touched, the actual the invisibility portion to it, that you can be casting a second level spell before you know second level spells, which can be pretty flavorful. And you're going to be using invisibility as an Arcane Trickster. Now, this Shadow Touch benefits all rogues. Any rogue can take Shadow Touch and benefit, because most rogue subclasses are going to be doubling down on one of those mental stats, either through the Swashbuckler, adding charisma to your initiative. I believe the Inquisitive adds... No, the Inquisitive uses your wisdom for their ability, and then Mastermind uses intelligence. So they all kind of use these mental stats. So getting a plus to one of them isn't going to be bad. And then getting invisibility as a rogue, you're getting sneak attack. And the last half feat is going to be that I'll talk about is Piercer. You increase your dex, and you get to slightly increase your damage. You're going to be rolling a lot of d6s, and when you roll those d6s, you are going to roll a 1, especially the more you roll. And just getting to re-roll a 1 it feels nice. Or 1 or 2, or even your lowest. So if you roll, the lowest one you roll is a 3, you get to re-roll that and take, and take the new roll. And it may be lower, but it may be higher. There are some power builds out there. If you look for someone like Treant Monk, Dungeon Dudes, or the D4 channel on YouTube, they'll explain to you how crossbow expert and sharpshooter are absolutely busted power builds. I'm not going to talk about that. The last one is going to be Skulker. Skulker's a pretty unique one. I don't like the wording on it. If I was you, I would review it, talk to your DM, see how they would make the rulings on some of these things, because they are kind of convoluted. But that's all I've got for feats. The last thing I'll talk about before doing my outro and saying goodbye to you all. Oh, my lovely wife just bought me Starbucks. I appreciate you. Yes. All right. The last thing I'll be talking about is multi-classing. Now, I have played in some groups that don't allow multi-classing. I'm not a big fan of it. I like the freedom to choose, but I also do like mono-classing. I feel like you can get a lot of benefits from just sticking in a class and playing it out, especially since you can't plan builds like some of these build guides online will say, because you realistically have no idea how long your character is going to last or how far the campaign is going to go. You can plan on the campaign going into tier 4 gameplay, but you might just find a good stopping point at tier 3 and decide you want to play some other characters, or you guys want to do a different campaign or something like that. Most gameplay is going to be pre-level 15, so you're not going to be going past level 15 most times. If you're a new player, multi-classing is going to be a little complicated. So I just don't see a lot of benefit in it. But scratch that. I see a lot of benefit in it. I just haven't had a chance to execute it in a way that benefited me. When you're taking Rogue, though, the Battlemaster fighter with their battle maneuvers and almost unanimously Hexblade, but some other Warlock subclasses, and then a lot of the Rangers subclasses are going to pair really well with these Rogue subclasses. So things to keep in mind with the Arcane Trickster is anything that gives you more magic. So any subclass that gives you a boost in your magic, like wizards, I believe specifically your Arcane Tricksters are enchantment and illusion focused. Let's focus enchantment wizard. That's going to be pretty great. Trickery, domain cleric, I could see being pretty fun for flavor, as well as getting extra spells that you can't get through the Arcane Trickster, because they pull just off of the wizard and they almost solely use illusion and enchantment. Taking a small level into Arcane Trickster, you now get cleric spells. Assassin, anything that doubles down on ambush tactics, mostly going to be looking at Rangers here. Maybe some fighters. Inquisitive is a wisdom-based subclass, so anything that benefits wisdom or uses wisdom as their spellcasting ability modifier or as their main stat. So you're going to be looking at monk, cleric, ranger. Cleric maybe not so much for these, because Inquisitive is not going to be big into the spellcasting, but you do what you want. I'm just saying that would probably synergize best. Unfortunately, when it comes to helping with their sneak attack, nothing can help the Mastermind, because the Mastermind doesn't do anything with sneak attack. So anything that helps rogues in general with sneak attack would go good with the Mastermind to help sneak attack, but because the Mastermind does nothing specific for sneak attack, nothing beyond what I was saying about Rangers, fighters, and some Warlock dips, the other reason we're looking at specifically Warlock dips and Ranger is because Warlock uses Charisma, Ranger uses Wisdom, all of those half feats we talked about benefited those stats, especially Elven Accuracy. So if you're looking to power build, taking Elven Accuracy, putting a few levels in Battle Master, taking Sharpshooter, that can be wild. So just keep that in mind. The Phantom, the Soul, there's a couple cool things for Phantom you could do. I'm going to be looking at Echo Knight because one, flavorful, that sounds real cool. You're playing some Edgelord Phantom Rogue, and then you have this Shadow Echo that comes off of you and fights with you. That's amazing. And your Echo Knight can proc sneak attack. The Scout, you're looking at the same limitations as the Assassin, or the same synergies as the Assassin, because it's all ambush tactics. The Souknife, Rangers, whatever, you're mainly going to be looking at some Rangers, and again, possibly Hexblade or, Battle Master. Those are going to be pretty consistent throughout this. Swashbuckler is specifically Hexblade, though. The reason even though I mentioned all of them would probably benefit from Warlock to a degree, possibly even Hexblade, but I specifically said Hexblade with Swashbuckler, is because they synergize extremely well. Adding your charisma to your initiative, adding your other abilities that are kind of charisma based, adding in something like, again, Elven Accuracy that specifies charisma, and then as a Hexblade, you'll be making all charisma attacks. The Swashbuckler is a melee, is pretty much the melee rogue. It's the one rogue you really don't want to do ranged. All the other rogues you can do melee or ranged. This one you really kind of want to do melee. Well, I guess Arcane Trickster, I would argue, is very leaning ranged. The Thief, I couldn't really think of anything specific that benefited the Thief. Maybe a Bard. But outside of the regular, Battle Master and or Ranger dips. But that's all I have for you and about Sneak Attack. I have a link, all of the art except for the very first piece of art in this video are all provided by Catalyst Art. Catalyst Art. She has a Patreon. She is on Instagram. It will be in the description below. Please visit her. She has some amazing work. I love it. She has pinup calendars. She does commissions. She has, I believe she does stuff with some third-party supplemental books and or, graphic books. She provides art for that. She does parties. All in all, great work, and I really do appreciate her letting me use some of her art for this video. If you all have any questions, comments, concerns, if you would like to continue a discussion down in the comments, tell me about your rogues, your rogue stories. Tell me about some things that you noticed in your campaigns that hindered the rogue, or some or just tell me about your rogue experiences. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Tell me about your rogue experiences. Sorry if my throat sounded a little gravelly at the beginning of this video. Like I said, my wife brought me coffee later, which really cleared it up. But I appreciate you, and I hope you have fun playing Dungeons and Dragons.